about these motherfuckers. It's time to go. All I want to do is fucking eat.
We're not practicing to beat somebody. We're practicing to beat everybody.
Nowhere to run and nowhere to hide for 4 quarters. They got to see us in our house for 4 quarters. They got to look us in the eye for 4. This is about us and our family and our house. This is about us. This is our mentality. We ain't backing down. We ain't running. Set a tone, send a message. This is our house. Physical toughness wins in football now. And if you in this room, you got it. If you come in here, you better believe in it. Because this physical toughness is what makes the difference. Elite focus. That's all I do to the guy across from me. I'm fixing to whip his ass. Not in my box. Not today. It's about us. It's about our family. We attack. You take that helmet and you strike them. And you strike them and you strike them. That's how you get respect.
Now I am going to pick shit out of them. Physically, I want to break them.
We're back for another week. Alabama fans are crazy. And Ryan Day just said, F it. Welcome back in to this edition of How About That DAWGSCAST. This week, you would think that we have headed into the off season, the quiet time for college football. But in today's college football, in the new world of college football, there is no quiet time. Now, for some of us who were way more than a casual fan, there was never an off season. It was always the season, the championship game, hopefully the bowl game, recruiting, all of that stuff carried us right into the spring. And then we were waiting for the latest updates about winter workouts and the team getting ready and who left and who's going to take over for whom and what are we going to do at spring practice. It just never ended. Maybe we could carve out 3 or 4 weeks somewhere between the middle of May and, say, the second week in June. Maybe we would have time there to sort of, if we chose to, decompress from college football before we got ramped up for the next season. Not anymore. That's out the window. And I think everybody feels that. And if your team is one of the teams that is making news during what used to be the old quiet time of college football, well, that can be one of 2 things. It can mean that really good things are happening or really bad things are happening. And Georgia has been on both sides of that coin over the last couple of years. But not this year. This year, the team that has been on everyone's lips, if you speak, talk, think, discuss, casually ponder college football, has been the Alabama Crimson Tide, and for good reason. Now, tonight's episode, I should probably put a stipulation right here. Tonight's episode is about Georgia, but we're going to go around the tree to get there. And despite what I say here in the stipulation, there are going to be fans of other teams, specifically the Alabama Crimson Tide, who are going to come at me in the comments. Doesn't matter what I post, where I put it. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, here on YouTube. There will be fans of the Alabama Crimson Tide who come running to tell me why I'm wrong or why I can't stop talking about Alabama. Now, it's like I said last week. It's not about any other team. It's about Georgia. That holds true tonight. But I will have Alabama on my lips tonight a lot. But it's not by my choosing. This is not a show that I sat around and dreamt up. No, the Alabama fans who watch my channel, who listen to the podcast, who interact with the Georgia Bulldogs content that I post, no, they're the reason for this channel, for this episode. Excuse me. It's like they spent the entire week writing me a personal letter, not on a computer, not in an email, old school, stamps, envelopes, handwritten letters in cursive. That's what you would think the Alabama fans spent this last week doing. They pinned me collectively as a group a letter demanding that we take a look at what's going on in Alabama since the retirement of Nick Saban. Alabama fans are crazy. I know this because they've shown me. Now, one more little caveat right here. If this isn't you, this isn't about you. So moving forward, if I didn't know better, I would think that Alabama fans had a real inferiority complex, like a real crisis of identity. Like they're really struggling these days with exactly who they are. And if I were right, that would be perfectly understandable. The greatest college football coach of all time just retired from the University of Alabama. They've named his successor, and the football operations over in Tuscaloosa are continuing on as they are around the country. Time waits for no man. Things are moving forward, and from the outside looking in, it appears that the Alabama fans are wrestling with this fact. They're having a hard time coming to grips with the new world. And yes, with the new world order. In fact, I have a little bit of a live look in at what was going on in Alabama over the last week.
Welcome to the party, pal.
Now, I thought that was funny as all get out. I put that together. I enjoyed it a whole lot because every Alabama fan I knew was under some level of anxiety, stress, angst, anger, discomfort. Pick your adjective. And when it's not happening to you, it's funny. It's fun to watch. Not gonna lie. Not gonna lie. But nothing was happening to Alabama that hasn't been happening to the rest of college football. It's just that Alabama was the one that had their foots on everybody's neck for the last 15 years. I have no problem admitting that. That's what happens. You have one team that's in really good shape and then everybody else is shooting for them. No problem. That's college football. That's what it's all about. Now at Alabama, they have a new guy in charge, though. His name is not Nick Saban. His name is Kalen DeBoer. Now, here's where I say I think Alabama fans, they might be a little sideways. And again, it's understandable. You haven't been here. You don't know what it's like. There's an entire generation of Alabama fans that have no understanding that there was a period of time, other than two coaches in their history, where Alabama was not good. They were average. Consistently average. Again, that takes nothing away from the two zenith points that they have achieved. But that's not the entirety of their history. So for an entire generation of young fans who know nothing except double-digit victories, nothing except competing for championships at every turn, every year, nothing except top-rated talent on their football team, top-ranked recruiting classes year after year. What they're going through right now is a bit of a rude awakening. And that's why I say all of this is understandable. This is understandable because they've never dealt with it, especially that younger group. And the older people, it's been so long since they were here or could be here, not on top, let me say it that way, that maybe they've forgotten what it feels like. Maybe they have forgotten what it feels like to have to be down in the mud with the peasants and the rest of college football. So I don't blame them for feeling a little bit of anxiety, a little tumult in their college football world, if you will. Now, you would think that just Saban retiring would be enough. That would be the end of this story. But it's not. It's not by a long shot. And a large part of that has to do with Georgia. And I think that is where the tit for tat, back and forth with us Georgia fans comes from here lately, this last week. I mean, again, I don't know what else to call it other than an inferiority complex or a crisis of identity when I am saying nothing about your program, nothing outside news of the day or stating pure facts. If I'm only speaking those words into existence and I have Alabama fans just all over me frothing, then it just leads me to think that they've sort of lost touch with who they are. They can't find their touchstone, if you will. Why else would you come onto a Georgia page or constantly be watching Georgia content and then feeling the need to somehow discredit Georgia or remind everybody of your past successes if you weren't going through a bit of a rough time? If you needed to convince yourself that everything's going to be okay. Now, I don't know everything. I don't know a whole lot, but I know enough to know when somebody's hurting, and I know that people who are hurting want to hurt other people. And that is what I have experienced over the last 7 or 8 days. Again, it's not completely misplaced. Georgia has a lot to do with what might be happening inside the Alabama fans' head right now. What's going on with their psyche? Let's look at the facts. Since Alabama and Nick Saban won their last national championship, which proved to be Nick's last championship, Kirby Smart and Georgia have won 2. In the time that Kirby Smart has been at Athens, he's won as many titles as Nick has won at Alabama. Had won at Alabama. Kellen DeBoer is a good football coach. But he cannot be Nick Saban. He will not be Nick Saban. Alabama, regardless of how good a shape they are still in, is going to have to figure some things out. And it's not unreasonable to expect them to potentially take a step back in 24. Alabama's last 2 teams under Nick Saban, according to talent composite rankings, were the 2 most talented teams in the history of the sport of college football. And what do Alabama fans have to show for it? 0 titles. National titles. 74 of Alabama's scholarship players on last year's team were 4 or 5-star players coming into Alabama. Now, we just watched what happened this past week at Alabama with players deciding to jump in the portal and things like that. And we all saw and heard from Alabama fans who were all up in arms and blaming the system and gosh darn this portal. Those young kids have no loyalty. They don't know anything about the brand. They don't care about Alabama. Now, I think that's nonsense. It's always about the players. Any success any coach has is because of players. They have to go recruit those players to come play at their school. Players commit to come to a school 99% of the time because they are committing to a person, a head coach, a position coach. All the other stuff, all of Alabama's mythical 25 national championships or whatever they say they have, all of the facilities, that's just on the periphery. It's nice. But when you have a chance to go play for the greatest to ever do it, like Nick Saban, that's what you're going for. And when Nick decided he wasn't going to be at Alabama anymore as the head coach, well, of course, those young men wanted to take a look around and see what else was out there. Some of them left because they wanted to go home. Some of them left for better opportunities for playing time. Some of them simply left because they felt like they needed to do what was best for them. And more power to them. You will not hear me say tonight on this show or at any point in the future that I am anti-NIL or the anti-schools paying for players to come because they give them NIL deals or any of that. That's not my position. You will not hear that. But the Alabama folks, some of them, they don't like it none too much. And here's the reality of what Alabama's facing right now. If you look at it, I think it's completely fair to say that inside the SEC, which is the best conference in the country, Alabama's no longer the top program. From where I sit, there are at least two programs that are in better position today than Alabama's program. The University of Georgia, I would rate as the top-rated program in the SEC today. And given just the general trajectories of the two programs that are like ships passing in the night, I would probably put Texas at number 2 right now. Then I would drop in Alabama. So what does that mean in the real world? What does that actually mean for Alabama as we move into 24? Again, worlds are colliding and things are changing, and Alabama fans are having a hard time dealing with it. But what it actually means is that now these Alabama fans that, I'm not trying to be mean, I'm trying to be honest, have a sense of entitlement that no other college football fan in the country can enjoy. They are looking at their Alabama squad, not all but some, saying, yes, Nick retired, but we are Alabama. We're always the best. Alabama will have a tremendous season. There will be no drop-off in 24. Alabama will win the SEC. Alabama will win the national championship. Now, you might scoff and say, who in their right mind is going to say that? That's my point. I have heard this not once, repeatedly over the last week and a half. These people are out there. Good luck to Kellen DeBoer. Because the reality is, he is taking over an historically great program. He has a tremendous roster today, even with the defections. But remember what I told you. 74 of their 85 scholarship players on last year's team, 4- and 5-star players. After the departures through the portal and via players leaving early for the NFL draft, Alabama only lost 12 of those type players. Now, 12's a big number. there are only like 3 programs in the country that can look at 12 and think, yeah, I can weather that kind of loss. But it's not the end of the world at a place like Alabama. They are still very talented. Kalen DeBoer has every opportunity to field a very competitive football team next year. But I would say it's not a stretch to think that the average Alabama fan is expecting Alabama to be competitive, to compete for an SEC championship, and to absolutely make the 12-team field for the college football playoff. And then anything can happen. Football happens. I don't think that's unreasonable to say about an Alabama fan's expectations for 2024. But here's the thing. They still have an Alabama quality roster, but they don't have a Nick Saban roster. And there is a difference. The only way you dominate the sport the way Nick Saban has over the last 15 years is with a Nick Saban caliber roster. And they don't have that anymore. Yet, Alabama fans, on the whole, have the exact same level of expectation that they had with Nick. There are a few out there who are proclaiming it to be absolute truth. That's not all of them, but they're out there. But even the calmer, more rational Alabama fans, they think Alabama should be what they have been, even if they give DeBoer a year. In year 2, it better be the way we think it should be. All I can say to Alabama and Kalen DeBoer and Alabama's fans is welcome to the knife fight. You don't have what you had. The situation's different. And at this point, I just told you, I think Georgia's the best program in the conference. Given where we are today, I think Texas is probably too. That means that Alabama is on the slide back. And it's not that everybody else is standing still. You've got the group behind Alabama that are on the come up. Think about it. LSU, Brian Kelly. Tennessee, Josh Heupel. Ole Miss is projected to be a top 5 team heading into the season next year. Texas A&M, Texas, Oklahoma. Alabama is going to be in a brass-knuckled knife fight, a rock fight, just to hold them at bay until Kalen DeBoer proves to us that he's something other than what we think he is. Is he superhuman? Is he going to recruit, I don't know, five stars every season in every recruiting class? Is Alabama going to be able to pull together the sort of NIL machine that places like Texas, Texas A&M, Ohio State, the kind of thing that they've managed to pull together? Is he going to have that at his disposal? Or is it going to be a down in the ditches muddy fight every week to not even think about playing for championships, but simply to keep everyone else in their place from an Alabama fan's point of view? And then once they've secured that position, take their shot at the perceived upper echelon of the SEC as far as I look at it right now. Alabama fans, a little crazy, but I get it. I understand. This is not a hate rant from me. I'm trying to be compassionate to your situation, and I'm pleading for you to take a deep breath, step away from the keyboard, walk backwards, focus on your team. Don't worry about Georgia or Texas or whomever. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. Again, I think Georgia draws a lot of the Alabama ire because of their position in the sport over the last few years. I mean, let's talk about Georgia. I've spent a lot of time talking about Alabama. Let's just drive home that point of why Georgia might be taking the incoming from your average Alabama fan. Let's see. The Dogs have won 30 out of their last 31 games and 46 out of the last 48. 3 straight 12-0 regular seasons. That's never been done in the history of the sport. And the program in Athens is doing that while Nick Saban's most talented teams in the history of the sport have failed to win the national title, which is the expectation. Alabama's not Vanderbilt. They're not Auburn. And they're 0-2 in the last couple of years, while Georgia was on the steady incline, taking on all comers. Georgia has had 3 straight years being perfect in league play. That's 8-0, 3 consecutive seasons inside league play during the regular season. Back-to-back national champions in the college football playoff, NIL, transfer portal era. When there's 4 teams in the playoff, Georgia's the only school to go back-to-back. Not only did Kirby and Georgia step up and just snatch the crown off of Nick's head in 21 and blow him out in his final national championship game appearance, they went on to back it up with the most dominating victory in bowl game history the next season for back-to-back titles. And they did it while the greatest of all time was watching. That's impressive. Georgia, 39 straight regular season victories. An SEC record, 27 straight regular season SEC wins. A 25-game home streak. 3 consecutive 13-win seasons. Again, I get it, Alabama fans. You might be a little crabby. Georgia went from being a 10-win team that occasionally would play in Atlanta for the conference title to being a team that was literally dominating the sport for the better part of the last 3 years. And your program, which absolutely felt entitled to play for the national championship every season, missed out 3 straight years with the most talented team in the history of the sport under the greatest head coach in the history of college football. So I get it. But again, my advice would be, don't worry so much about Georgia. Worry about Alabama, because there's plenty going on over there in Alabama to keep you busy. Now, the reason that I wanted to do this show this week spun off of the Alabama story. And it had a lot to do with what was happening around the rest of the country. And that is that we are in an era of portal combat in college football. An era where the transfer portal giveth and it taketh away. And every school has a choice about how they want to handle it. Again, I told you, this is where we are in college football today. NIL is what it is until it's something else. And everybody's trying to figure it out. And I harbor no ill will toward any school that is choosing to maximize their NIL potential and use it to their advantage. College football, specifically recruiting, is a zero-sum game. And if you can do it, you should. I hope I've been clear enough on that point. Because from here, what I want to talk about is the news coming out of Columbus, Ohio, and Ryan Day. Now, we all have an opinion on Ryan Day down here in SEC country. Honestly, I don't think we're far off. I think we're actually pretty on the beam. And any college football fan worth their salt is going to acknowledge the fact that Ryan Day is a good football coach. No one's saying he can't coach. We're nitpicking when we're taking shots at Ryan Day. Let's be honest. Let's call it what it is. Ryan Day has a 56-8 overall record at Ohio State. He has 2 Big Ten titles to his credit, 3 college football playoff appearances, once into the title game where he took a loss. But things have changed in Columbus. Things have changed in Columbus to the point where Ryan Day took a look around at what was happening in the Big Ten and nationally and said, fuck, this is what we got to do. Whether I like it or not, at a place like Ohio State, we have to do what I'm about to tell you we have to do, or I'm getting fired or packing my stuff, taking my ball and going home. Because otherwise, there's no point in trying to do this. He looked at what happened at Michigan, who did whatever it took to win. And what happened? Michigan won that national championship this year. Say what you want about how they did it. Lord knows I have my opinions. But they did. Now, it might be the least relevant national championship in memory. I know it is for me. It's like it didn't even happen. I mean, Michigan goes out, they play the game, they win the game. And then what happens right on the heels of that? I mean, like Nick Saban retires and now nobody cares. Nobody cares about what Michigan did. Certainly not down here in the South, not in the SEC. We see that as some sort of aberration that was stolen with an asterisk and so on and so forth. I think that's the prevailing feeling. That's not the feeling in Columbus. No, they saw everything Michigan did, and boy, did it sting. They saw them do whatever they had to do to win, and then those dudes went right out there and did it. So Ryan Day spent a large part of 2022 saying, hey, we're broke. He went out and talked to business leaders and everybody that would listen and said, we have to have money to compete. If you want an elite roster that's going to beat the top program in the country, the University of Georgia, this is what we have to do. And in the process, while he was ramping up, the worst possible thing happened, which was Michigan proceeded to beat Ohio State 3 consecutive years, win 3 consecutive Big Ten titles, and cap off this season with a national championship. Holy cow, if you're Ryan Day. So yeah, he was like, we have to change some things. So what did he do? Ryan Day spent all that time talking to all those business owners and said, I need some money. And they delivered. And boy, Ryan's not wasting it. In this recruiting cycle, traditional recruiting and transfer portal cycle, the report is that Ohio State has spent $13 million. $13 million on player retention, roster management, and recruiting. Friends, I don't care who you are. That is a huge number. And that number was the number before what went down with Caleb Downs, the Alabama safety. And one more thing about Alabama, because it's relevant and they pop back into this discussion. Listen, Alabama fans, we get it. We know Georgia is your Super Bowl now. We are all very aware. But still, watching Alabama fans celebrate their player going to Ohio State was Twilight Zone level stuff. They need to check themselves. Alabama fans were crazy because of stuff like that. So, Ryan Day went out, asked his donors for the money. They delivered, and boy, he's putting it to good use. Let's just take a look at what Ryan has been able to do for his roster with this big old fat bankroll he had to play with. First, he used it for player retention. Wide receiver Emeka Buka was projected first-round draft pick. He's back. Denzel Burke, defensive back, projected second-round pick. He's back. Running back Travion Henderson, projected third-round pick. He decided to come back. But wait, there's more. Tommy Eichenberg, linebacker, decided to come back. Guard Donovan Jackson decided to come back. Defensive tackle Tyleik Williams decided to come back. Defensive back Lathan Ransom decided to come back. Defensive end Jack Sawyer decided to come back, as did defensive end JT Tuiomoluau. All of those players could have gone to the NFL, but in Michigan fashion, said we have unfinished business. Ryan Day made it worth their while, and they decided to come back to Ohio State to try to rectify what they see as an injustice in the Big Ten and the New World Order. But Ryan was not done. $13 million goes a long way. When he started trying to bolster his roster through recruiting, whether it was traditional high school recruiting, like with the number one overall player in the country and the number one wide receiver in the country, Jeremiah Smith, needless to say, he could offer a very appealing, a very lucrative NIL deal for Smith to consider before he made his commitment and ultimately decided to sign with Ohio State. But then Ryan and Ohio State turned their attention to the transfer portal, where they proceeded to go out and get a new interior offensive lineman from Alabama, Seth McLaughlin, the best running back in the SEC and potentially in the nation in Quinshon Judkins, who, wait, let's pause for just a second right here and point out where Judkins is coming from. Ole Miss, where Lane Kiffin is the head coach. The Twitter-crowned king of the portal. Judkins left Ole Miss, where they are free with the funds, sitting in position to be the number one running back on a team that's a top 5 preseason squad. He walked away from all of that to go to Ohio State, where he's going to share carries. Now, not a bad plan. If you're a running back, sharing carries is a pretty good idea, actually. And if you're going to be well rewarded for making that decision, showcase your skills in an offense that's probably going to score some points, more power to you. Oh, by the way, Ohio State also picked up a starting quarterback who just happened to win a Big 12 title last year at Kansas State. And a freshman All-American who was Mr. Everything for Alabama last year, and Caleb Downs decided to join Ryan in Columbus and play for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, I do not begrudge Ryan Day, Ohio State, or any other school about playing the game the way it has to be played today. And that's all they are doing. But it is still insanity. It is the wild, wild west when it comes to NIL and college football right now. But it's like I said, your team has a choice. My team has a choice. How they want to play the game, what they want to invest in it. Rare is the occasion that you are going to have a player like 5-star plus safety KJ Bolden, who admittedly, straight into a microphone, admitted that he took a pay cut, took less money, took a less lucrative NIL deal to come to the University of Georgia and play for the coaches he has the opportunity to play for. That is the rarity these days. And again, I'm not blaming the players. I'm not blaming the schools. Just pointing out that most folks are going to go where they can get the best deal for themselves personally. The bottom line when it comes to Ohio State heading into 2024 is that it is national championship or bust. Period. There is no in between. There is no coming up short against Michigan. There is no not making it to the championship game. You don't get by with saying we competed, we got to the title game. That is not the position that Ohio State and Ryan Day are in heading into 2024. And it's a situation of his own making. As if the Heat were not great enough with Michigan doing everything that they're doing. Now there are zero excuses for Ohio State, for Ryan Day. Doesn't matter. Injuries, don't care. You have built your roster with insurance. That's what some of this money is. They had a really good running back. They went and got another one. Why? Because running backs get hurt. They had heirs apparent at quarterback, but they went and got another one. Why? Because they thought they could make the roster better. That's fine. But if things don't go the way Ohio State wants them to go, if Ryan Day fails yet again to win a national championship, I mean, I'm not telling you that Ohio State would fire Ryan Day. But I'm not telling you that either. I mean, in this world of college football, if he were to leave for any reason, you think what happened at Alabama was bad. Imagine what would happen at Ohio State. Another top-tier program with a roster on par with Alabama. I'm very interested to see what's going to happen with Michigan. Harbaugh looks like he's out the door. If he's in the NFL, what are those Michigan players going to do? It will be interesting. Essentially, when you have a coach leave in this era of college football, it blows up your roster. There will be change. Things will not remain the same. The teams that manage to navigate that change the best are the teams that can stay at the top and keep their foot in the door to have a chance to win those national championships that more and more seem to be limited to just a handful of schools. And NIL has changed the game in that a team that you think might not be there, if they pull things together, can interject themselves into that conversation in a hurry. So on the whole, that's what we were discussing this evening. Alabama fans are crazy, and Ryan Day had about enough of it and said, "Fuck it," and we are all in. He's pushed everything to the center of the table. That is what college football is in 2024. Between the time this is being spoken into my microphone until we get into college football season, there will not be two more interesting stories across the landscape of college football than what's happening at the University of Alabama, than what's happening at Ohio State University. And then, oh, by the way, you can't forget about that program down here in Athens, who's going to be right there in the conversation as well. So We talked a lot tonight about things that were not directly tied to the University of Georgia, but I think here at the end you can see that everything we talked about was absolutely about what Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs are doing in Athens. The bar is set at such a level right now because of the work that Kirby Smart and Georgia are doing that you have to do whatever is necessary if you feel you have a chance to compete. And it doesn't matter anymore who you are. Alabama learned this week they're back down here with the rest of us, as it were. Ohio State saw their bitter rival just twist the knife by claiming that national championship this year. And now they're responding. The tit for tat, the nuclear arms race that is college football right now when it comes to NIL and the transfer portal is insanity. And it's only going to be crazier and be more and more wild until it's not. That day's coming. I can't claim to know that I have an exact peg on what it's going to look like, but things will continue to change. Ultimately, I think we're going to end up in a good place, maybe even a better place. But right now, hold on tight, set your notifications, watch channels like mine where we talk about this kind of stuff, because it is going to be a wild, wild ride. If you haven't, now would be a good time to check and see and make certain that you are subscribed to the channel here on YouTube, that you follow the podcast over on Apple Podcasts so you don't miss a beat. And I want to point out a couple of points of pride this week. We passed 2 million views here on the YouTube channel. Very proud of that accomplishment. 11 months, and we've already hit a mark like that. I can't tell you how thankful I am for all of the support, every person who comes and sits in with us, every person who shares our material, who leaves a comment, who likes the video. I'm just very, very grateful. Thank you for that. We are on the road, on the march to 10,000 here on the YouTube channel. Thank you for helping me build the largest Georgia football dedicated fan page here on YouTube. That's the goal. That's where we're headed. And I need you to stay with me because I'm going to keep doing everything I can to bring you the best Georgia content I can from a perspective that only I can offer. So thank you for being here with me. This week, when you feel that things are a little sideways, remember, take a lesson from an Alabama fan. Don't lash out. Focus on your own business. Put one foot in front of the other. Keep going until it's done. And if you think you need to take some extreme measures to make it happen, be like Ryan Day and say, F it. Do what you have to do to make your dreams come true. That seems like a wonderful place to leave it. Until next time, thank you all for being here with me. Thank you all for hanging in. Thank you all for the support. And go Dogs!
So how about them fucking dogs? That's what I told them.